Ethan, a 28-year-old man who was once the symbol of wealth and success in New York, was now merely a shadow of his former self. Amid the bustling crowd on Fifth Avenue, he sat hunched on the sidewalk, his face gaunt and his skin pale. His once bright blue eyes were now dull, reflecting the exhaustion of days without food. His disheveled hair and tattered clothes failed to conceal his thin frame, with his ribs protruding clearly beneath the thin fabric of his worn-out shirt. Ethan hadn't eaten in over 2 days. The icy wind blew through the streets, but the hunger haunted him far more intensely. His stomach twisted painfully, each pang a cruel reminder of his hopeless situation. Every passerby seemed caught up in their own world, clutching bags of food and steaming cups of coffee, silent torment for his starving body. The scent of freshly toasted bread from a nearby hot dog stand filled the air, making his mouth water uncontrollably. Yet all he could do was sit there motionless. In his mind, Ethan wrestled with himself. Just one more day. Someone will notice me. Surely, someone will, he whispered, clinging to the last shreds of hope. Yet another voice, bitter and unforgiving, echoed back in his mind. Who would notice a ragged mess like you? You're just a failure. Invisible in this glamorous city, it was already midday. The faint sunlight peeked through the towering skyscrapers, yet it failed to warm the cold void inside Ethan. He scanned his surroundings and noticed other homeless people rummaging through trash bins for scraps of food. The thought crossed his mind, but his lingering pride held him back. No, I'm not there yet, not yet. A few feet away, an elderly man with silver hair and a long beard observed Ethan closely. His eyes were filled with both sympathy and deep understanding. At last, he spoke in a hoarse voice. Young man, sometimes life feels hopeless, but we must survive. Ethan looked up, his voice trembling. I know, but sometimes it feels like this life will never change. We survive on spare change and the kindness of strangers. We need more jobs, homes, a real life. The old man nodded slowly, his gaze distant, as if recalling his own past struggles. But before he could respond, something unexpected happened. A middle-aged woman suddenly stopped in front of Ethan. Without a word, she knelt and placed a paper bag in his hands. Stunned, Ethan opened it. Inside was a warm sandwich, the scent of freshly baked bread and grilled meat filling the air, making his stomach twist even tighter. His blue eyes filled with gratitude as he looked up. Thank you. You have no idea how much this means to me. The woman simply offered a gentle smile before walking away, leaving Ethan overwhelmed with emotion. In that moment, the faint glimmer of hope he thought had long faded flickered back to life. Maybe there are still good people in this world. Maybe I'm not entirely alone. As Ethan prepared to take his first bite, his gaze drifted toward 2 other homeless men nearby. Their sunken faces and hollow eyes mirrored his own reflection, hunger and despair. Without hesitation, Ethan broke the sandwich into 3 pieces, handing each of them a share. We can share. No one should have to starve when we can help each other. Across the street, this scene did not escape the notice of Olivia, a young woman with long chestnut hair and deep blue eyes. She felt a surge of compassion watching Ethan's selfless act. Driven by impulse, she stepped forward, intending to offer help, when a firm hand grabbed her wrist. It was Victoria, her stepmother, a powerful woman with sharp features and a gaze full of calculated coldness. Don't be foolish, Olivia. You mustn't involve yourself with people like that. Her voice was laced with scorn and disdain. But mother, they need help. How can we just ignore their suffering? Olivia protested, her voice trembling with emotion. Victoria's grip tightened as she pulled Olivia away toward the luxury boutiques nearby. Yet Olivia's gaze remained fixed on Ethan and the 2 other men. A powerful urge stirred within her. Breaking free from her stepmother's grasp, she opened her purse and crossed the street. With trembling hands, Olivia handed Ethan a stack of cash. Please take this. I hope it can help you, even just a little. Ethan froze in disbelief, his eyes meeting Olivia's in a silent exchange filled with gratitude and unspoken emotions. Thank you. Your kindness means more than you can imagine. From a distance, Victoria watched the entire interaction. Her steel gray eyes narrowed, flashing with both anger and something far more dangerous: calculated intent. Her mind was already devising a sinister plan involving Ethan. Olivia returned to her stepmother's side, bracing herself for the inevitable confrontation. But instead of an outburst, a cold, twisted smile formed on Victoria's lips. "If you insist on helping those kinds of people, perhaps I should teach you a lesson you'll never forget," she murmured darkly. Her gaze locked onto Ethan with a look of dangerous intent. The story was only beginning. Schemes, secrets, and compassion would soon intertwine as Victoria set her cruel plan into motion. Robert felt the social status and relationships of his family were under serious threat due to his stepdaughter Olivia's recent actions. Victoria, his second wife, whispered furiously, "She's been helping those less fortunate. This will tarnish our reputation." Robert, his voice weary yet firm, objected. "But Victoria, she's my daughter. I can't change who she is." However, a hint of resignation under his voice betrayed his growing submission to his wife's control. Victoria paused. No longer pacing in anger, she turned, her calculating gaze fixed on her husband. "I have a plan that will solve both problems at once." Sat up straighter, his entire body tensing. He recognized that tone too well. The voice of a woman with a meticulously crafted scheme, one that rarely ended well for others. "What are you planning, Victoria?" A cold, calculated smile formed on her lips. "A plan that will teach Olivia a lesson she will never forget." Robert's throat felt dry, his heartbeat quickening with dread. He knew he should resist, stand up for his daughter, but years of living under Victoria's dominance had chipped away at his resolve. His voice, barely above a whisper, trembled. What are you suggesting?" Victoria leaned in closer, her eyes glinting with malicious intent. "Do you remember that beggar Olivia helped? What if we used him to show her the truth about people like him? If she witnessed firsthand how despicable someone like that could be, she would finally see the error of her ways." "Victoria, what are you implying?" Robert's voice quivered as a cold shiver ran down his spine. Victoria straightened abruptly, her figure towering over him, casting an imposing shadow. She turned to the window, gazing at the pristine garden below. Her lips curled into a frosty smile. "We'll make Olivia marry that beggar," she declared, her voice laced with cruelty and satisfaction. The words struck Robert like a physical blow. His hand shook, nearly spilling the glass of whiskey he held. "You've lost your mind." "That's my daughter you're talking about. This is monstrous." Victoria turned back, her expression as sharp as steel. "Monstrous? No, Robert, it's necessary. How else will she understand the harshness of reality? How else will she learn that the world isn't full of fairy tales and noble intentions? She needs to experience it, to be forced to live with someone like him. Trust me, she'll come running back to her old life, begging to be free of this fantasy." Robert shook his head, his face pale. "But what about Olivia's happiness? She deserves more than this. A man who truly loves her." Victoria arched a brow, her lips curling into a mocking smirk. "Don't be naive, Robert. She may have a kind heart, but she was raised in privilege. Give her a few days with a man like that, and she will be desperate to return to her comforts. This is not about happiness. This is about protecting our family's name and her future." Robert slumped back into his chair, his shoulders heavy with the weight of her words. He loved Olivia deeply, but it had been so long since he had defied Victoria's iron will. And the young man? How do you intend to convince him? Victoria's eyes gleamed with victory. "Money. For someone in his condition, a substantial sum will be more than enough to make him comply." The air in the room felt suffocating, thick with tension. Robert stared out the window, his mind swirling with fear and uncertainty. He wanted to protect his daughter, but could he stand against Victoria? Victoria stepped closer, her voice soft but filled with unyielding determination. "Robert, sometimes we must make hard choices to protect the people we love. Olivia needs to learn the consequences of her naive compassion." Robert rose slowly, his back to her as he gazed out into the garden. "I'm not sure, Victoria. I'm afraid this will only break her spirit." But Victoria had already made up her mind. She turned sharply on her heels, leaving the room with an air of absolute certainty. Meanwhile, across town, Ethan sat on a weathered park bench, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The young man, with his worn clothes and weary face, radiated a quiet dignity despite his struggles. Little did he know, his life was about to be changed forever. Victoria appeared suddenly, her expensive designer outfit strikingly out of place in the humble park. She approached Ethan with a piercing gaze, her voice calm yet calculated. "You're the beggar who's been here recently, aren't you? I'm Victoria, Olivia's stepmother. I have a proposition for you." Ethan blinked, confused. "A proposition? What could you possibly want from me?" Victoria's smile remained icy as she leaned closer. "An offer that could change your life forever." Ethan could never have imagined that his decision that day would not only alter his own fate, but also intertwine with Olivia's in ways neither of them could foresee. Liv sat on the edge of the bed, her face pale and drawn with worry. Olivia reluctantly followed suit, her gaze never leaving Victoria. The stepmother paced the room, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor, a sound as piercing as knives cutting through Olivia's mind. "Olivia, your obsession with helping those less fortunate has made your father very concerned. It's time you learned a valuable lesson about the real world," Victoria said, her voice a twisted blend of feigned concern and icy indifference. A suffocating knot tightened in Olivia's stomach. She spoke slowly, her voice trembling with fear. What are you talking about, Victoria?" Victoria halted, turning to face Olivia directly, her expression severe. "I'm talking about consequences, dear, and a marriage." The words hit Olivia like a punch to the gut. She shot up from the bed, her hands trembling, dizziness washing over her. "A marriage? You can't be serious." Victoria's lips curled into a cold, satisfied smile. "Oh, I'm deadly serious. You will marry the beggar from downstairs, Ethan, the man you were so eager to help today." Shock spread across Olivia's face. It felt as though every drop of blood had drained from her skin. "What? No, you can't be serious. He's done nothing wrong. He has nothing to do with this." Her voice echoed through the room, filled with desperation and disbelief. But Victoria remained unshaken. She stepped closer, her voice dropping into a venomous whisper. "Oh, but I am completely serious. And if you refuse, well, you wouldn't want to know the consequences. Imagine what the police would say if they were to find certain illegal substances planted on him. How humiliating that would be." Olivia froze, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. You can't do that. He's innocent. Why are you doing this? What do you gain from this cruelty?" Victoria's wicked smile deepened. "Gain? I simply want a daughter-in-law who understands her place in this family and society. It's time you learned that compassion is a luxury, not a virtue." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, her body trembling as she felt cornered, trapped in a nightmare she couldn't escape. She glanced toward the window, recalling the moment she had seen Ethan arriving with Victoria earlier. The thought of him being harmed because of her crushed her even more. If I agree, will you leave him alone? Will he be safe?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Victoria tilted her head, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "Of course, Ethan will have a comfortable life, far from the streets. And you, dear, will learn a valuable lesson about the real world." Meanwhile, Ethan stood in a luxurious bathroom, his eyes wide with disbelief as he took in the sight before him. The massive marble bathtub gleamed under the soft lights, while neatly folded towels and meticulously arranged toiletries adorned the counter. The butler gestured toward the items, speaking with calm professionalism. "Everything you need is here. Please, take your time." Ethan nodded, still too overwhelmed by the sheer opulence surrounding him. As the butler left, he continued staring at the steaming water filling the tub. How long had it been since he last experienced the comfort of a real bath? Slowly, he shed his worn, dirt-streaked clothes and lowered himself into the warm water. A wave of comfort spread through his body, melting away layers of exhaustion and hardship accumulated from his life on the streets. He exhaled a deep, relieved sigh, letting the heat soothe his aching muscles as he scrubbed away the grime that had clung to his skin for far too long. The water turned murky almost immediately, darkened with the residue of countless days without proper care. Ethan closed his eyes, letting the warmth envelop him, feeling as though the water was washing away more than just physical dirt. It was cleansing fragments of a painful past. Reflection. The man staring back was unfamiliar. Clean skin, damp hair falling gently over his forehead. Yet those blue eyes still carried the weight of too many burdens, too many memories. Dressed in the crisp, expensive clothes Victoria had provided, Ethan felt like he was wearing someone else's skin. The fine fabric pressed softly against his frame, the tailored collar too stiff, too foreign. It felt like a mask, polished and presentable but utterly disconnected from the man he truly was. As he descended the grand staircase, an eerie silence settled over the room. All eyes turned toward him. At the foot of the stairs stood Olivia, her breath catching the moment their eyes met. For a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze. "Ethan, I almost didn't recognize you," Olivia whispered, her voice trembling, her gaze a mixture of astonishment and something else, something Ethan couldn't quite name. Before he could respond, Victoria emerged from the shadows, her lips curling into a satisfied smirk. "Perfect. You've been cleaned up nicely. At least now you look somewhat acceptable." Ethan remained silent, simply nodding, unsure how to respond to the biting remark. As Olivia slowly turned and left the room, her eyes lingered on his face, filled with unspoken questions. A strange, conflicted feeling churned in Ethan's chest. Gratitude, pain, embarrassment. He felt like he was being paraded around as a spectacle, a tool to prove a point. Everything was happening too fast, too real, too cruel. In the past few days, Olivia couldn't stop thinking about Ethan. The thought of this arranged marriage left her restless. Yet deep down, she felt an overwhelming sense of empathy. She kept reminding herself, maybe this is my chance to help him rebuild his life. Maybe this is how I can truly make a difference. Seated on the silk-upholstered chair of an upscale hair salon, Olivia exhaled softly as the hairstylist completed the final touches, leaving her hair in soft, elegant waves. The stylist, noticing her pensive expression, tried to lighten the mood with a gentle question. "Are you excited for your big day, Miss Olivia?" Olivia hesitated, her gaze fixed on her reflection in the mirror. Soft brown eyes filled with tenderness, but also deep, lingering doubt. "It's complicated, but I'm determined to do the right thing under these circumstances," she murmured, almost as if speaking to herself. Her mind drifted back to fleeting moments with Ethan. The shy smile he gave her, the gratitude in his eyes when she had shown him kindness. He deserved a chance, a real chance to change his life. And if she could be part of that, perhaps this marriage wouldn't be entirely meaningless. The hushed whispers from nearby jolted Olivia back to reality. Two hairstylists, speaking softly, clearly unaware that she could hear. "Isn't she Victoria's stepdaughter? I heard there's been some scandal about her stepmother recently." The other nodded knowingly. "Yes, I heard that too. Something quite dark, but they never found enough evidence. Everything was hushed up." A chill ran through Olivia's chest. Her heartbeat quickened. The gossip, combined with the strange tension she had felt around Victoria in recent weeks, was painting a troubling picture. Victoria had always been secretive about her past, but was she hiding something far worse than Olivia had imagined? "I need to find out the truth," Olivia thought, determination hardening in her eyes. "If she's hiding something dangerous, I will expose it." Hours later, the evening sun cast a golden glow over the grand cathedral, its towering facade bathed in warm hues. Luxury cars began arriving, their doors opening to reveal high society guests stepping out, their faces filled with curiosity and judgment. At the entrance, Ethan stood stiffly in an impeccably tailored suit that felt utterly foreign against his skin. His fingers instinctively tightened around his tie, his heartbeat echoing loudly in his chest. The whispers began to spread through the crowd like wildfire. "Is that him?" the beggar Victoria took in. "This is humiliating for Olivia. How could they allow this to happen?" Heat flushed Ethan's face as the words pierced deeper than he expected. Victoria had made sure everyone knew about his past, turning him into nothing more than a spectacle for gossip. Does Olivia think the same? Does she see me as just this? The crushing weight of shame began to settle in his chest. But before it could consume him entirely, a warm hand rested gently on his shoulder. It was Robert, Olivia's father. His eyes were clouded with both guilt and sorrow. "Ethan, I'm so sorry for all of this, I truly am." Before Ethan could respond, Robert disappeared into the sea of guests, leaving him with even more questions. And then, out of nowhere, Another figure emerged from the crowd. An older gentleman, quiet yet commanding, with eyes that seemed to study Ethan closely, as if recognizing him from long ago. The man leaned closer, his voice low and urgent. I need to speak with you. It's important." Ethan blinked, startled. "Of course, sir, but what is this about?" The man glanced around cautiously, lowering his voice further. "Not here. Meet me behind the cathedral in 5 minutes. There are things you need to know about Victoria." Ethan's stomach twisted. He watched the man disappear into the shadows, his mind racing. Could this finally explain everything? Could it reveal what I've suspected all along? Inside the cathedral, Olivia stood before a grand mirror, the soft white fabric of her wedding gown cascading gracefully to the floor. She was surrounded by fresh, delicate flowers, yet despite the beauty around her, her expression remained conflicted. Worry, fear, and above all, determination. "I will find out the truth, and if Victoria is playing a game, it ends today." Taking a deep breath, she stepped out of the dressing room, heart pounding louder than the soft organ music that had just begun to fill the church. With her eyes locked on the figure of Ethan waiting at the altar, questions and quiet resolve surged through her heart. "This will not break me. Not today." At that very moment, Victoria suddenly rose from her seat in the cathedral, shattering the heavy silence with a voice as sharp as a blade. "I have something to say." Every head turned toward her, the tension tightening like a noose around the room. A chill swept through the air as her icy words echoed against the cathedral's grand walls. Ethan's heart nearly stopped. His eyes widened in shock, a cold sweat forming at the back of his neck. Did she know? Had she somehow discovered what he had learned? Panic gnawed at his chest as Victoria's heels clicked rhythmically on the marble floor, each step echoing like a countdown toward disaster. A cruel smile curled on her lips as she reached the altar. Standing just feet away from Olivia, she drew a deep breath before speaking again, her voice loud and commanding. "Dear guests, I believe everyone here deserves to know the truth about this farce of a wedding." Her gaze pierced straight through Olivia, who stood frozen in her white gown, her face pale with shock. Olivia's hands trembled as her heart pounded violently in her chest. Victoria continued, her words slicing deeper with each syllable. "This young woman has disgraced our family name. She thought she could defy her place, our place, by marrying a filthy street beggar." Yes, the man standing beside her, Ethan, was living on the streets just weeks ago, covered in dirt, starving, and desperate. A ripple of whispers surged through the crowd, quickly escalating into audible gasps and murmurs. All eyes shifted toward Ethan, scrutinizing him with disdain. The judgment, the humiliation, it was suffocating. Olivia felt tears welling up, her body trembling as she forced herself to speak. Her voice cracked with emotion. "Victoria, please stop. Don't do this." But Victoria was relentless. She arched a brow, voice dripping with mockery. "Oh no, darling, it's too late. You made your choices, and now it's time for the consequences." Ethan clenched his fists, rage simmering beneath his skin. Olivia, the woman he admired, cared for, was being publicly humiliated, and he couldn't stand it. Suddenly, he stepped forward, his voice echoing boldly through the church. "Enough. Victoria! The truth needs to be heard." A hush fell over the crowd. All eyes were now on Ethan as he faced Victoria head-on, his voice steady yet burning with determination. She faltered, her confidence flickering for the first time as she hissed, "What do you think you're doing? Sit down. Now!" But Ethan didn't back down. His voice rose with clarity and strength. "My real name is Hudson Howard. I am the son of Jonathan Howard, Victoria's first husband." Gasps erupted across the cathedral. Victoria's face turned pale, but Ethan pressed on. "An elderly man approached me earlier today. He told me the truth about who I am. The missing child from years ago was me. And Victoria, you knew it. You hid the truth and abandoned me to protect your wealth and status." The crowd was no longer whispering but openly reacting, shocked murmurs rippling across the church like wildfire. "That's a lie," Victoria spat, her voice cracking. This is impossible." Ethan took a step closer, voice unwavering. "I have a birthmark, the same one Jonathan described when he last saw his son. But after my father's death, you took everything, the inheritance, the estate, and you made sure I disappeared so you could keep it all. You left me with nothing. Tears finally spilled from Olivia's eyes as she stepped forward, standing by Ethan's side. "Victoria, is this true? Why would you do this? How could you do this?" Victoria's lips parted, but no words came. The judgmental stares pressing down on her from every direction left her speechless. From the front row, Robert, Olivia's father, stood abruptly, his face filled with both anger and heartbreak. "Victoria, you lied to us all. You manipulated my daughter, my family. You're not fit to be part of this household any longer." Defeated and disgraced, Victoria took a shaky step back. The weight of her exposed lies crushed her, and she turned silently, retreating down the aisle as murmurs of disapproval followed her every step. As the heavy doors of the cathedral closed behind her, silence fell again, but this time it was filled with relief. Ethan turned back to Olivia, his hands gently cupping hers, his voice softer now, filled with sincerity. "Olivia, I'm so sorry for everything, but I promise you, from this moment on, I will protect you. No one will ever hurt you again." Tears streamed down her cheeks, but her smile finally broke through, radiant and full of trust. The crowd, still reeling from the revelation, slowly broke into quiet applause, acknowledging not just the truth but the strength of the love they had just witnessed. And in that moment, Olivia knew love and truth had prevailed. Ethan's final words hung in the air, echoing through the grand cathedral like a thunderclap. Chaos erupted. Gasps, whispers, and disbelief filled the room as the weight of his revelation sank in. Olivia stood frozen, pale as the reality of Ethan's words hit her heart like a crushing wave. Tears streamed down her face, cold and silent, while Victoria, trembling and ghostly pale, seemed to shrink under the unbearable weight of her long-buried secrets. "I stand here today not as the broken man you thought you could manipulate," Ethan's voice rang out once more, unwavering, "but as Ethan Howard, reclaiming my true identity and my rightful place in this world. I am here to ensure justice is finally served." Silence swept over the church again, thick and suffocating. Olivia's heart ached as she stared at Ethan, who had once been a man burdened by pain, but now stood with strength and dignity. Victoria, visibly shaken, struggled to regain control, but the facade she had maintained for so long was finally crumbling. Robert stepped away from his wife, his face pale with shock, as though truly seeing Victoria for the first time, and disgusted by the person she had become. His voice was heavy with both sorrow and disbelief. "Victoria, how could you? How could you lie to all of us?" To Olivia, to me. Days after the dramatic confrontation at the cathedral, the aftermath rippled through their lives, altering everything. Ethan, determined to leave no shadow of doubt, pursued a DNA test with a distant Howard relative. The tension in the days that followed was unbearable as everyone awaited the results. On a bright afternoon, Ethan, Olivia, and Robert gathered in the lawyer's office. The envelope containing the results trembled in the lawyer's hands as he opened it, his voice echoing with finality. "Ethan is, without question, the long-lost son of Jonathan Howard." A sob of relief escaped Olivia as she clutched Ethan's hand, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. Robert, still processing the gravity of it all, placed a supportive hand on Ethan's shoulder. "After all these years," Robert whispered, voice thick with emotion, "the truth, it's finally out, and despite everything, we can finally find peace." Ethan nodded, his voice trembling. "Yes, and it's time to leave the past behind, for good." But for Victoria, consequences were swift and severe. Exposed for her web of lies and manipulations, she faced public disgrace and criminal charges for fraud and suspected involvement in Jonathan Howard's death. What was once ruled an accident was now being reinvestigated under a cloud of suspicion. The authorities descended upon the grand estate with a search warrant. Every corner of the mansion was combed through. Files, computers, even the jeweled brooch Victoria had once worn proudly was seized as evidence. Prosecutors were relentless, presenting damning evidence that not only had Victoria deceived the family, but possibly concealed a much darker crime. Once a celebrated socialite, she was now ostracized, her invitations to high society galas rescinded, her phone silent. The opulent estate she once flaunted now felt more like a gilded prison as the media swarmed outside, documenting her spectacular downfall. In a bitter twist of fate, Victoria was now experiencing the very isolation, scorn, and abandonment she had once inflicted on Ethan. Meanwhile, Ethan and Olivia only grew closer, bonded by the hardships they had overcome together. Their love had been tested and had emerged stronger than ever. When they finally married, it was a quiet, intimate ceremony, nothing like the lavish spectacle Victoria had once orchestrated. This time, there were no secrets, no hidden agendas, just love. During the reception, Olivia took Ethan's hands in hers and whispered softly, "Ethan, what if we used our resources to help others? People who've suffered like you did. What if we could truly make a difference together?" Ethan's eyes filled with emotion. "Nothing would make me happier, my love. Let's turn this pain into purpose." In the months that followed, Ethan and Olivia established the Howard Harrison Foundation, a charity dedicated to helping homeless youth and abandoned children. Tirelessly, they worked to provide shelter, education, and new opportunities for those society often overlooked. Robert, haunted by his past complacency, joined them in their mission, determined to make amends by supporting their cause wholeheartedly. The foundation quickly grew, becoming a beacon of hope for countless lives. Beyond offering shelter, it established rehabilitation programs and career training, giving people a chance to rebuild their lives with dignity. Their impact spread like ripples across the city. Hundreds of children once left on the streets now had homes. Dozens of scholarships were awarded annually, breaking cycles of poverty for underprivileged youth. Olivia's dream of creating lasting change was coming true, fueled by Ethan's relentless determination. The city, once a hub of elite indifference, began to transform. Inspired by Ethan and Olivia's story, other prominent families followed their lead, reevaluating their priorities and giving back to the community. Ethan, once the lost boy, had become a symbol of resilience and redemption. He spoke at schools, youth centers, and community events, sharing his story with heartfelt sincerity. His words, raw and genuine, sparked hope in countless hearts, especially among those facing their own struggles. Olivia, with her grace and unwavering compassion, used her social influence to further the foundation's reach. She became a voice for the voiceless, proving that true strength lay not in wealth or status but in empathy and action. Together, they had proven that wealth wasn't measured in possessions, but in the ability to lift others higher. As the years passed, Ethan and Olivia often reflected on their journey, one that had begun with cruelty and deceit but transformed into a powerful legacy of love and healing. On a quiet evening, as they watched the sun set over the horizon from their family home, Ethan turned to Olivia, his voice soft with gratitude. "For so long, I felt lost, like I was searching for something I couldn't name. But now, I finally understand. I was searching for home, for purpose, and for someone to love." Olivia smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "And to think, it all started with one act of kindness on the street. Never underestimate the power of compassion. Ethan, together, we can keep changing the world." What had begun as a cruel plot fueled by selfishness had blossomed into a profound tale of love, redemption, and the power of doing what was right. Ethan and Olivia's story serves as a powerful reminder that even in the face of betrayal and hardship, love and kindness can triumph. Through their foundation, the Howard Harrison legacy grew stronger, touching countless lives and proving that true success lies not in wealth, but in the ability to uplift those in need. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more heartfelt stories. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful narratives. Stay tuned for our next emotional journey, coming soon to your screen.